Welcome. Please find a seat. We've been told that it's very important that we are not blocking the escape routes. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome to everybody, distinguished panelists, ministers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, and all the people watching online. This is being streamed. So, I'm extremely happy to have the opportunity to chair this side event on men and gender equality. It's become kind of a long-standing tradition for the Nordic Council of Ministers to host a ministerial panel here at the CSW. We have titled our side event today, A Joint Venture into an Equal Future. You might say that's kind of high ambitions, but let's aim high. That is what we did in Beijing in '95, and that is what we need to continue to do. You might have noticed the little movie that was running while you came in. It's a silent movie, and it won the first prize in a Nordic competition when we were celebrating the 40 years of working together in the Nordic Council of Ministers on gender equality. So we celebrated that last year. But without further ado, I would just like to briefly introduce the ministers and the participants here today, and then we'll start. First of all, we've got the Danish minister, Mr. Manu Sareen. Then we've got Mrs. Aiglu Haradottir, the Icelandic minister, Ms. Åsa Raina, Swedish minister, Mrs. Anne Sipilainen, first Undersecretary of State, and Mr. Hans Bratskar, Norwegian State Secretary. I am Kira Apple, and I'll be the Danish chair of the executive committee. We have such one in the Nordic Council of Ministers, where we work on gender equality all during the year, and Denmark has the presidency this year. But let me give the floor to Mr. Manu.
Thank you, Kira, and it's quite right. We're gathered here because we want to aim high, and we can. My name is Manu Sareen, and I'm the Minister of Gender Equality from Denmark, and representing the Danish presidency at the Nordic Council of Ministers. Some of my colleagues are here, and it's a great pleasure for me welcoming my colleagues, but also all of you. And as Kira just said, this year's topic is Women and Men, a Joint Venture into an Equal Future. But we'll give the floor to Mr. Hans Bratskar first, because unfortunately he has to leave, and afterwards we'll continue the debate. Hans?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak first, even though I don't have to leave as early as I had planned, because we have had some schedule changes, as you know, but I was actually going to go to New Haven to make a presentation at the university there. But that has been postponed. But I'm very pleased to be with all of you and see the interest in this room. And gender equality is always of the greatest importance, but I mean 2015 is a year of particular interest to all of us. It is, as we have heard throughout the week, 20 years since the 4th World Conference on Women was held in Beijing, and that we had the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The UN Security Council also, 15 years ago, passed the groundbreaking resolution 1325, and 2015 is the year where we will complete the work on the Millennium Development Goals and look to the new Sustainable Development Goals. Although there has been much global progress towards equality between men and women, the achievement has been very uneven. We have a long way to go before the Beijing Platform for Action is fully implemented. I want to underline, and especially appropriate in a forum such as this one, that men have just as much responsibility as women for promoting gender equality. Men are important actors of change in addressing inequalities and discrimination faced by women and girls. We are still more likely to hold political power and thus in a position to bring about change in several spheres of society. Gender inequality is a structural challenge, and there is a need to influence the existing power structure. Women must participate in a meaningful way in all political processes. Both men and women experience that their opportunities and scope of action are confined by traditional gender roles. Men and boys can face discriminatory barriers and practices as well. We will also gain from more equality between the genders. This is not just the right thing to do, this is the smart thing to do for all of us. Men and boys have the capacity to bring about change in attitudes and relationships that are critical for the promotion of gender equality. The CSW has been important for advancing the agenda on gender equality, including for the role of men. The agreed conclusion back in 2004 at the CSW 48 session, it recognized the role of men and boys in achieving gender equality, demonstrating an international acknowledgement of the need for men to be actively involved in developing and implementing legislation and policies that foster gender equality is something that we need to do. Similarly, providing positive role models for other men to promote gender equality is equally important. However, as I said, there is a long way to go before we have gender equality. And what does it mean in practical terms to include men and boys in our efforts to achieve this goal of gender equality? And I want to mention 3 specific areas. In Norway's new National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, it was launched just last month. Our government recognized men as important actors in promoting women's rights and participation in peace and security processes. Men have an equal responsibility to implement the women and peace and security resolutions. We hold the most decision-making positions also in the security and military establishments, and are therefore in a position to implement real change in this important area as well. Another priority for the Norwegian government is education. We want to be a global leader in mobilizing support for education through our international development cooperation. Education is essential in order to obtain gender equality. And education is key to empowering girls and women and enabling them to be actors and participate actively in society. Education, however, is much more than the ability to learn to read and write. Learning life skills is key. And learning to be good global citizens is extremely important. And we believe that comprehensive sexuality education is part of this. We believe that this is indispensable to ensure that young people are able to make important decisions in their lives, boys as well as girls. We believe that sexuality education is imperative for boys as well to learn how to protect themselves, including against sexually transmitted infections, and learn how to avoid unwanted pregnancies, and how to treat girls with the greatest respect, and to reduce the level of violence, and that violence is not only forbidden, it's also unmanly. This is what young people want, and this is what we should want for them. Furthermore, education may be the best way to eliminate child and early and forced marriage. Men need to understand that it's not okay to marry away one's daughter or to marry a girl too young for marriage. The third area that I would like to shed light on is hate speech. Hate speech against women is a democratic and fundamental problem in our societies. Hate speech targeted at women is a gender equality problem. This type of harassment cannot be trivialized. This is very important and a growing challenge with the increase in the use of social media. Last year, my government therefore launched the campaign Stop Hate Speech on the Internet. We want to bring the issue into the national debate in Norway, and we certainly want to bring it out in debate around the world. The efforts to involve men and boys in the gender equality agenda is, as I have said, extremely important. And the UN campaign He for She, and I was happy to be here at the launch in September last year, is a good example of such an awareness campaign. And we hope to see men and boys around the world join this important campaign in time to come. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bratner, and for drawing our attention to three very important areas: conflict prevention, resolution, education, including sex education, and also the upcoming emerging issue of hate speech and involving men in this, and then reminding us that we can all sign up for the he for she. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Eichler. Thank you.
So how many have already signed up for he for she? Can I see hands? Okay. Okay, good. And the ones that haven't, please go online after this. In January, in Iceland, we had an opportunity to talk about men and gender equality in a conference that was called the Barbershop, and it was done in cooperation with the Republic of Suriname. And the discussion was the radical idea that gender equality will be achieved only with the shared efforts of both women and men. And we are there with that conference. We were building on the campaign, He for She. And I think we all remember the wonderful speech that Emma Watson gave in 2014 when she launched the campaign. And I think we all of the ministers here, we're really, really proud to see how high the participation of men in the Nordic countries has been in signing up for the campaign. And in the conference, it was truly shown that we need to motivate and we need to mobilize men to work for gender equality. We need to get them to step up, to get them to participate and to commit. But we also need to point out that men, as well as women, have a responsibility if we intend to achieve gender equality. But not only that they have the responsibility, but they also benefit from gender equality. It's not only about the benefits for women, but it's also the benefits that men get through gender equality. And yesterday, we were reminded how radical the speech that Hillary Clinton gave in Beijing when she said that women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. And when I saw that clip, I got goosebumps. And I hope some other people also got some goosebumps. And it wasn't cold in the room. And it was just still so strange after all these years to think about that this was radical. It was radical to point out that gender equality and that women's rights are human rights. And I hope that all of us that sit here in the room, we can agree with this statement today. But it wasn't so then. So the commitments that we got through the Beijing Platform for Action, they have helped us to sharpen, to see the objectives of gender equality in all societies. And they also raise the question which we are responsible for answering, the question being simply, how do we achieve these objectives, or how do we achieve gender equality? That's why we're here, right? And I'm more and more convinced that we cannot do this without the men. We need to do it through education, we need to do it through information, we need to do it through public debate, we need to do it through meetings like these, and any other opportunity that we have to point out all the benefits that come with gender equality. And it needs to become and has to be a testament of our values, our ideas, where we call for the participation of all citizens, all humankind. And we have in Iceland been discussing the issue of men and equality for quite some time. And already in 1991, we established a committee, which is quite common that we politicians establish a committee. And it was supposed to report on the changing role of men's participation within the family and division of labor in the home. And the reason for this was in no small part motivated by the very high labor force participation of women in Iceland. And I think I recall we do still have the highest percentage of women that are active in the labor market in the world. In 1996, we had another committee. And we appointed a panel of men who were assigned to put forth suggestions on how to get men involved in the issues of gender equality. And I think I can state it here that even today, the ideas that came out of that panel were very progressive. And not only did they publish a report or suggestions of what we should do, but we actually did something with them. We introduced the Icelandic Parental Leave Act at the turn of the millennium, based on their ideas, and also the lot of fight from the Icelandic women's movement and other that saw this as a really important issue to secure women and men equal rights to parental leave. And I think I can state that this system that we introduced there was a true success. And when it was in full effect, close to 90% of fathers used the opportunity to stay at home with their children. And once again, in 2013, we had a new panel who came out with further suggestions on how we could involve men more actively in the discussion of gender equality. They put forth several topics: men and violence, care policy, education, gender segregation of labor, and men's health and quality of life. And I'm sorry, I don't really have time to go through all of these things, but what I would like to mention are three things, really important things. In Iceland, despite the achievements that we have made in gender equality, we still have one of the most gender segregated labor market in the Nordic countries and also in Europe. And in the year 2015, it still remains harder in Iceland for a man to become accepted as a kindergarten teacher than it is for a woman to be accepted as an engineer. And this is one of the main things that we see how to break what we still have, discrimination between men and women when it comes to salaries. Another thing, somebody told me a few months ago, and I think it was in Sweden actually, that if we really want to get men involved, we have to do it through their children. And that's so important that men have equal rights to child custody and care. That we have to acknowledge that men have fundamental right to know and care for the welfare of their children, to take care of their children. And we need to make sure that we guard those rights, to use their paternity leave, and that they have equal rights to women to take leave when they have children. And third is an issue that we have had a lot of discussion about in the whole world, which has to do with violence against women. It is one of the most pressing issues of gender equality, and we need men to make a stance and actively denounce it. It is a gendered issue, and when we look at violence in general, in convictions and incarceration, the ones that actually go to prison across countries, numbers tell us that there are men that hate, there are men that use violence, but there's also men that end up going to prison. So we cannot do this just through the penal system, but we need to do it by looking at how we can help perpetrators and how we can protect victims, how we can both look at how it impacts both men and women, and that's the only way we can stop it. So I'm going to stop right now. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. for bringing men and gender equality through the barbershop conference that I've heard so much about. It was a real success here in New York earlier this year, to mobilize men. And also to proving that commissions and panels, they do work. So that's a very good notion to go on. And also, you mentioned several issues, but a very important notion, which might be new as well, is men as fathers, which might be one of the ways that we can actually help mobilizing men to be included in this work. Well, I would like to now give the floor to Ms. Osarina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy that so many came. I'm sorry, I guess some people could not get in, but I'm really grateful that you made the effort to come today. I am representing a feminist government, declared so by the Prime Minister to the Parliament when we were appointed. And of course, this means a lot of possibilities, but also a lot of responsibility. We really have to move the agenda and to close gaps that we know of. One important way of, or one important task for the government in general is, of course, to modernize the society and the model that we have for that in general. We believe in a strong labor market participation, both for women and men, which is very important for gender equality, but it's also a way of advancing the whole society. I think that when you use gender equality in general as a model, as a motor, when you see gender equality as a motor for the whole society, in that itself, that makes women and men work together to a greater extent than otherwise, although it's not paradise and all the problems are definitely not solved. But in order to achieve a great labor force, for instance, and good conditions for women and men working there, when you, as a government and a state, need income taxes from as many as possible, then women and men should have incentives and possibilities to go through school and education, take up paid work, and contribute to the common systems, services like daycare, elderly care, social schemes like parental leave, whatever. And I think that in that model, both women and men and the systems around this model should include both genders and give them the same possibilities to take part in this development, but that itself also makes women and men work together at least in one dimension. And I think, to me, it's difficult to see gender equality any other way. It's definitely about rights, it's about human rights, but it's a model to achieve economic growth, to make children meet both their parents and get to know both their parents, to make use of all the education that the state actually invested in, etc., etc. So to me, it's very important to work together with the ministers now to create a modern model like this, and to ask both women and men to take part in all of this work. We have to set very clear targets in certain strategic areas and see to it that we take decisions, allocate resources, and prioritize in order to achieve or reach gender equality in a way that we can keep track on and measure, etc. To us, obviously, it's very important with the links between the national agenda and the international agenda, and we are here today to speak about men's and boys' and women and girls' involvement in gender equality to achieve the agenda. I was in Beijing 20 years ago. It was a very good meeting. I was in a seminar earlier today where a representative of the Swedish women's movement said that she's She is about 30. And she said she's so tired of older women always referring to the Beijing conference, because there's no way she could have been there. She was 9 years old, and it's nice that it was a good conference, but could we move on? And I'm a fan, obviously, of the Beijing, both the conference and the results. But I think that she has a very valid point, because there is a reason for not having a new conference that size or that form, and that is because we are afraid to open the agenda and the negotiations completely. There is a lot of resistance. But I think, had we done that, the part about men and boys would have been much stronger than it is today, because a lot has happened during these last 20 years. I think there are also other topics which would probably be in the agenda had we opened it. And I really think that the new generation deserves their own Beijing conference. But I also think that the discussions that we have here at this meeting are very good. And I do see that lots of seminars are about the role of men and boys. And I think that they are of very high quality as well. I was in Chile 2 weeks ago. President Bachelet of Chile organized a meeting as a warm-up, you can say, to this meeting, to the CSW, and to the connection to the coming development goals, or to post-2015 agenda. Also there were discussions about the role of men and boys, and I used to work for UN Women in a country in Latin America, and I was really happy to see that also there lots of organizations really organized together with the women's movements to work for gender equality. I think also in this context it's very important to mention, as my colleagues did before, the He for She campaign. And the Swedish Prime Minister obviously is a champion of that campaign. And also all the ministers, 50% of the cabinet, it's obligatory for them to also join the campaign. And they did. I checked. And it's not just important to be part of the campaign, it is important in itself, but it's also important to commit to the list that comes with it. I think that the topics that we are talking about are quite serious. I mean, my colleagues mentioned violence, serious resistance to women's advancements, the uneven power balances that we see. I think that the trick is to not blame collectively, but still address these serious issues. When I was in Latin America representing UN Women, there was another campaign from the UN called, in Spanish, El Valiente no es violento, which means the violent person, a brave person is not violent. A brave man is not violent. And that was actually a success in Latin America. And I heard many comments from men saying that, of course I joined this campaign because I'm also sick and tired of my daughter being beat up, or of my wife not earning as much as I do, or seeing that this brilliant neighbor girl does not go to school, or whatever. So I think there is really a way of reaching from the campaign level to the to-do list. You also mentioned important areas like responsibility for unpaid work and so on. That I think that is a key area here. I want to conclude with some kind maybe of proposals for what we could do in more concrete terms. When we discussed this panel when we were in Copenhagen, we said that, well, yeah, the topic of men and boys has been on the agenda for some time, and in the Nordic countries there are lots of concrete examples of how you can work, but still it's a bit like, okay, so what should we do? and I don't really have, I don't know exactly what to do, but I think ambitious work should be done, and I think that it's important that men and women do it together. I think it's also important in the Nordic context to see that there are maybe new forms, but I'm very, very worried about the xenophobic movements also in my country and in the Nordic countries. And unfortunately, the majority of people in those groups are men. Not at all, but more men than women. I think also when we discuss extremism these days, it's also an issue about not very constructive masculinity. So we have some issues emerging that we have to deal with. But what can we do? Obviously, governments can change laws which are discriminatory, and that's what we should do all the time. And we should analyze laws and rules from a gender perspective, as always. But I think also that I think we should also help boys and girls to open space around them. We expect things from boys which I think narrow their life space, in the sense that you often ask a boy if he plays football. You never ask him which was the last novel you read. And we have lots of these everyday concepts about men and boys. And I think that school, obviously, we always come back to school, but it is important. We should have good quality evidence-based programs there and introduce these topics from the beginning. And also in my country, when you ask boys whether they have had serious discussions about themselves being boys, very often they say no. Nobody talked to me as a boy, being a boy. And I think that is still something we have to do with good methods. We also know that boys say in Swedish schools, at least, that when it comes to sexuality education, they think that it's important to know things about their bodies, but they really want to know more about relationships, what to do with these enormous, fantastic feelings that you get, at a certain age. But how to handle that, how to get into a relationship with respect, and how to handle sexuality on an emotional and interrelational level, and of course introduce topics like how to prevent violence. I think that we have to do this with methods that we know could actually work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Åsa, for all the many notions and important aspects. I think we could all agree that we need to move on from Beijing, maybe with a new model, as you're proposing, a model for society, including both women and men, and gender equality as the motor. I like that notion. Gender equality needs to be the motor for this new model. And also to bring on the table the notion of masculinity and gender stereotypes that we need very much to deal with in this aspect. So let me pass the word on to Anna Sipilainen. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's so wonderful to be here among Nordic colleagues because I think we are all talking about the same issues, and I'm apologizing if I'm repeating things, but I think it's important to repeat these issues because we all know that no country has reached full gender equality, or women's rights are not really fully realized anywhere. And this is very much about both rights and practices and structural issues. But having said that, it's equally so very much about changing our attitudes, changing attitudes of both women and men, and also men and boys have to be fully involved in our work in reaching gender equality. And I would also like to raise the He for She campaign, which is an excellent campaign, and I think we all are actively participating in it. And in Finland, President Niinistö has also joined as a champion world leader in that campaign, and several male ministers as well, so, and my colleagues at the Foreign Ministry and so on. So please, really, all of the male participants here, please join. It's extremely important. But really, I think this is about human rights. It's really gender equality is about realization and fulfillment of human rights. women's rights must be fully recognized and fulfilled. So we really have to look at proper legislation, and that's an absolute must, because without right type of legislation, things just don't happen automatically. At the same time, it's not about texts, it's about implementing the proper legislation our parliaments have agreed upon. And there, I think it's really, we have to look at societal and behavioral patterns and how to improve them. So I think it's really important that it goes to the level of individual, not only structures, not only governments, parliaments and legislative efforts, but really every man, every father, every husband, every son, every brother has to take seriously his own responsibilities in this regard. And really, this has been an issue we have been debating a lot in Finland also. But another key precondition is really the change of traditional gender roles. Actually, both women and men are exposed to gender stereotyping throughout our whole lives, like expectations on how boys and girls should behave, as you said, and really expectations regarding career choices, family roles, social roles, and so on. And these really have very far-reaching societal impacts, as we all know, and they may really limit individuals' freedom and choices and lead to discrimination. And really, it's not only limiting us women, but it's really limiting also men's choices and possibilities. So we have to address this at various levels, within families, in education, in media, at workplaces, and of course, always at the political level. And in this work, I think we need, in Finland, but also I think globally, really courage and sense of urgency in addressing these stereotypes, because it's really often meaning breaking the traditional rules and norms and practices, and that's something we just have to break. So workplaces, very important. Glass ceilings, we have to break them, and I'm very proud to say that in the recent glass ceiling index published last week, Finland was ranked as #1 in the world. But having said that also, we are not perfect yet either, but really it's a good step forward. One element linked to work life, jobs, opportunities is an uneven sharing of caring responsibilities. Of course, mainly what we are talking about is childcare, but it's also more and more so taking care of our old parents, so really taking care of the elderly in our aging societies. So these really address women and men differently. And there also, I think, national policies and international measures must include actions to meet really education, employment types, so that also men and boys are participating in caregiving in all walks of life. And this is really something that we have to pay specific attention to. Certain jobs automatically are structured in that way that it's kind of thought from tradition that they are male-dominated jobs, that okay, you don't have to take care of anyone, you just walk and go into office and do things 12 hours per day. We have to change these structures. So Finland continues both with intergovernmental activities to develop gender mainstreaming, so to dismantle gender segregation in education and work at home, to support and develop the expertise on gender equality actors and also project funders, and to increase general knowledge of the gender perspective and to support the activities of resource centers for women and female entrepreneurial potential. And in many projects, we are systematically aiming at reducing horizontal and vertical gender segregation in education and working life, increasing awareness of equality issues and promoting equality planning in practice, and incorporating gender perspective and equality expertise in workplaces and educational institutions. So it has been said many times, but this is really a mega year, and this is a revolutionary year really for gender equality, and we have to do our utmost to reach as good outcome as possible in the September summit for future sustainable development agenda. I think this year merges all the efforts we are having, and when we get the post-2015 agenda, I hope it will also accelerate the implementation of Beijing Platform for Action and also the Resolution 1325. So let's work on this together. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for bringing our attention to the fact that we need to look at an individual level. We need to deal with male role models and societal patterns, that we need to look at a structural level with legislation, implementation, mainstreaming, and that we need to look at a societal level, including the civil society and other actors, and not least the workplaces, because that's really, really important for women to be empowered and for the gender roles to be softened up. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Meno as presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A lot of Danish ministers, they also signed up for he for she, my colleague from the parliament also. But I was thinking that it's very good and very brave that ministers are doing that and presidents, but we are maybe we have to go to the next level now and having ordinary people in the sense of, you know, like my family, my dad, and so on, having signing up. And actually, it's quite long. It's I think it's a month ago, 2 months ago, I asked my dad to sign up. I just forgot everything about it. Not asking him, but, you know, telling him about he for she. And I haven't heard anything yet, but he said, I will look at it. So that's a start, and I hope that when I come home that that'll be the start of the new step, because I think that's very, very important that we have other men also signing up for that. But this is not just about he for she or my dad. This is about CSW as well, and it's always very special being at CSW, but as you all know, this year is much more special because we are all of us, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Beijing conference. We did it yesterday, Step It Up, great speeches, nice music. And when we look 20 years back, we can see in the last 20 years that the Beijing Platform for Action has actually been a very, very important cornerstone for the global efforts for the empowerment for women and girls. The Platform for Action set out a roadmap towards the world for everybody, and especially for us politicians, as a guideline also for every woman and girl, so they can exercise their freedom and also fulfill their dreams. And we have also been celebrating because a lot have been achieved since Beijing 20 years ago. For one, the listing of the 12 critical areas of concern has been, as I told you, a guide star for women's empowerment in our countries all over the world, and that's very important. And also globally, women's health and education, the level of that has progressed, and more women are participating at the labor market. That's the good news. More women and girls have attended a higher education, and women are increasingly economically independent and empowered. That's also the good news. So this year is the time for celebrating all the good and positive progress. But I'm sorry to say, and I know you agree, and we have been talking about this at our meeting this morning, we need to achieve much more, and still the Beijing Platform for Action has to be like a backbone of global cooperation and national initiatives, and it will surely also be a while before the plan is fully committed and fulfilled. And that is the sad part of the story, unfortunately. And we also have to acknowledge that worrying about new issues has occurred also around the world as a backlash. We see it as the threats against women and their full participation in democracy has gone back. Yesterday, and also the day before, I've been talking to a lot of NGOs telling me, I knew it, but it's always nice to have the newest knowledge about this, that especially sexual violence is increasing in many countries. And that's a very, very big problem, because it scares women to participate in the democratic process. So that's a very, very big backlash. So we cannot rest on the words and the ambitions from the Beijing from 1995. We need to build on the top of the action plan and, of course, adjust into modern everyday life. And for this sake, we also, and I think that's very important, and also a new step we have to take, we have to include boys and men in our future work for gender equality. And that's why we are here today. Unfortunately, men and boys are a part of the problem, but fortunately, we are also a part of the solutions. So we have to deal on that. As my Swedish colleague also said, when you look at extremism in Denmark, in our country, unfortunately, it's still most men, and it's still most men battering women, most men making harassment on the internet forum. That's also some new problems that we are seeing, where we have to find some solutions. But as I said, we've come far from 1995 regarding women's empowerment, but not far enough. Not in Denmark, not in the Nordic country, and certainly not in the rest of the world. Men have been a part of this journey, and we have to recognize that. And some men have done their part for women's equal rights, and that's also very good. But if we want to move further into the next level of women's empowerment, we need to involve many more men, because we won't reach our goals if we don't do that. And I think that we have basically 3 good reasons to include men. And maybe many of you are thinking, yeah, but I've got 6 and 10 reasons. Yeah, we all might have that, but right now I've got 3 good reasons. And the first is that we must, because gender equality benefits both men and women. Secondly, we should, because both men and women should be able to unfold their full potential and participate, of course, in the society. And 3, be better because it is a smart thing to do, or in other words, it's a good business model as well. I see men also as partners for change. Men are quite important as supporters of women's empowerment. For instance, in the fight against violence against women. In Denmark, I know you also have it in many places in the world, we have white ribbon, but we are including men in this fight. And actually, and I'm very proud of that, we can see that the numbers of women getting better the last 10, 12 years, that the numbers have actually declined. And I think, because we always hear that it's increasing, so it's also very important looking at places where we have some success. And in Denmark, the numbers are declining, so that's very good. So if we include men into, as I said, gender equality work, we will promote a certain win-win situation for everybody. And I really like to say not only a win-win situation, but a win-win-win situation. And it's very rarely you have a triple win situation. But the third leg, if I may say, is also for the children, because they always suffer when there's violence against women. And I would also like to emphasize that the involvement of men is not just a small add on the empowerment of women. It's a very essential part if we want to move on. And I'm telling you, we really want to move on. We need to move on to the next level of gender equality here 20 years after Beijing. So I was actually very happy last year to see UN Women and men and women around the world, as all my colleagues had said, making a huge effort with the global campaign, He for She. It's actually a small step, but I think it's a big step if you want to change minds of many men. And this is also a part of the solution to change minds. So to be more concrete also, it's as my colleagues also told you, it's very important also looking at where we can actually involve men supporting women's rights. One clear example is as I told you, the elimination of violence against women, the White Ribbon campaign. That's a very, very good campaign, and I think that the idea and the thinking that men are saying to each other, of course we don't hit women. In the Danish football fields, in Denmark, football is very popular, just like other places in the world. We had a few years ago soccer stars giving violence the red card, showing other men, where they were sitting in the football field looking at football, superstars saying that of course we don't accept violence and therefore we give violence the red card. And that's very, very effective. It's very effective having role models saying to other men that this is not acceptable at all. Men are also very important partners of change in promoting women's sexual and reproductive health and rights. That's very, very important. If we can encourage men and boys to abandon harmful stereotypes and instead make respectful and healthy relationships, we can come a very long way. Also here, we in Denmark are starting in the schools. We are also teaching both girls and boys the right thing to do and what's not the right thing to do. And this awareness is also very important because they'll take it all the way to when they get grown up. So, as all of us has said, the time has come to move to the next level of women's empowerment, and that's very, very important now. And it's my humble hope that this side event will give you a bit of inspiration for working with men and boys and their promotion of gender equality. And I also hope that we will get a lot of inspiration and ideas from this CSW as we used to do. Globally, we must learn from each other. That's very, very, very important. And this meeting is a very important meeting from my point of view, as ever, as a symbol of a worldwide collaboration in our common strive for women and girls all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Manu. You were talking a lot about the next level. And in a minute, we're going to open the floor, because let's all try and bring gender equality to the next level. Because, as you said, we must, we should, we better. So with these words, I would like to open the floor. We have 15 minutes. We have to finish sharp, 12:45. I'll take about 3 or 4 questions, and then the ministers will be allowed to answer. And I saw one over there, and one there, and one there. Yeah.
Well, is it on? Yeah. Well, good morning. Thank you for the wonderful panel. And I'd like to add a few comments first. To always remember that it's about gender equality, but it's also about women's rights and the quality and dignity of life of those women, maybe not even we women here, those marginalized women that have to walk miles for water, or that cannot walk their streets safe without fearing rape or being kidnapped for human trafficking. So I think we cannot forget of having women in the center of the discussion. I'm not saying that men and boys aren't crucial for the task of gender equality, but remember that, you know, the lives of women is what is at stake. And secondly, about the He for She campaign and all these decision-making men that are adding to the campaign and they're committing to it, I like to see those men giving their wives happiness and fearless lives. I like to see those men committing in their houses to be non-violent, because maybe signing online, it's well seen, you know, it's politically good, you know. But the thing is to change our lives individually in our daily tasks, at work, at home, at schools. And I think there is the biggest challenge, you know, to see those men commit in their own lives. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you please introduce yourself? And in order to allow most as possible questions, please make it short. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Halde Solst. I'm Deputy General Secretary of Education International, and also have a background as a teacher from Norway. I would like to thank all the panelists, and I want to thank all the Nordic countries for all the good work they do on gender equality. I believe they do a lot of good work. I was very fascinated by all of you referencing also education as a very important area. And the Minister from Iceland, you mentioned also having your panels. And I was wondering if you could say something about the advice you received on how to break the gender-divided workforce. Because in my experience, a lot of the projects that we as teachers in education have worked on has been about how to change girls, how girls can make choices that boys traditionally have done, both in their interests and also in their career choices. But we haven't done the same for boys in the same way. And I believe if we are going to bring boys on board and men, it's not to bring them on board instead of girls and women working for gender equality, it's in addition, so that you sort of get double force. But then you also have to have projects that address the boys in a positive way without forgetting the girls. So what kind of advice the panel give on breaking the gender divided workforce?
First there. No. Okay.
Yes, hello. I'm Salla Säästämoinen from the European Commission. I would ask about the home and care work, household and care work. It has been said that one of the biggest societal changes now in the 21st century would be if we would have the 50-50 goal for sharing the household work between women and men. Currently in the Europe situation as that women work 26 hours unpaid work per week. Men work 9 hours unpaid work. What is your stake and how would you make the men have 50-50 from the household and care work, please?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm from Toronto, Canada, but I was actually born and raised in Lima, Peru, and so this question speaks to that because I was raised in a culture that is very male-oriented and very macho and so forth. And in Toronto, I understand the need to develop this holistic approach. But we also need to take a quick and very realistic look at culture and how culture influences, the behavior in men, and that changes depending on the culture in which you're from. And so, even though we're developing a holistic plan, we need to give within the government programs and so forth that a look at the cultural perspective of how to address this in an effective manner, because it's addressed differently throughout different cultures, and the issues of men is not similar in all cultures. It changes depending on the culture, and so that's my advice, perhaps.
And the last question there. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, my name is Anna. I'm part of the Danish delegation as a CSO representative. I come from the Danish Medical Students Association, where we work with sexual and reproductive health education, both in Denmark and abroad. I would like to ask, and also thank you for all the wonderful comments made in this panel. I think it's really encouraging to hear all the recommendations, but I would like to hear how you plan to involve young people, and especially student and youth groups, because I think we have a key role to play in implementing many of these recommendations and ideas you bring to the table. And on that note, I would also like to recommend all of you to get a Twitter account. I've been trying to Twitter a lot about all the great things back home to my student group, and only Manu Serene has a Twitter account. So I would encourage you to get that as well. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you for moving us ahead from Beijing and bringing us into the IT world. Thank you. And would anybody? Yeah, Åsa?
Thank you very much. I think you all have very valid points. I won't answer all of them, otherwise we'll be here until midnight. But I wanted to pick up on the women's rights comment that you made. I think that for me, at least, when I say you have this on different levels. It's about politics. It's about movements. There are lots of organizations, men's organizations, women's organizations. They work together. They work separately, but they try to change the gender agenda from different angles. But I mean, if you promote these kind of changes as a government, for instance, I think it is important to know why you're doing certain things, and that's why I think it's important to talk about evidence and so on. And I was in Africa and visited work there being done on young men and their notion of power and sexuality, you could say. And it took me some time to find someone there who, but then men participating there said that, yes, it's a fact that in my country men have more power than women do, and men have more influence about sexuality or the household or whatever. So that means I have a lot of responsibility, and therefore it's important to think about these things. And I said, yeah, that's true. But what about changing those power relations and seeing you as part of those? Is that part of the activities? I think that's the next step, he said. And I think it has to be the same step. You have to know why you do these things. At the same time, I'm absolutely convinced that we do stereotypes, as I said, give also very narrow space to boys. And I personally am very concerned about the fact that we don't encourage boys to read, for example, to the same extent as girls. Although we know that if we know anything about future, the ability to read and understand complex texts will be absolutely vital. And we know that boys perform less than girls do in this, and they also, the great majority of persons leaving university with a title, no, that's Spanish, degree, thank you, are girls. And I think you have to think of that at the same time, but very important to know why you do certain things. And also I agree that men are an unexploited source when it comes to unpaid work, but I think others can tell you how. In my country, I think the parental leave is very important.
Yes, and Manu, you wanted the floor? Okay.
I will do short. I'm afraid to look at my Twitter now. Everything you say is. First of all, Haldor, you were talking about this segregated work market, and we have the same problem in Denmark as well. First of all, it's a very good view you're having, because we have been focusing on girls and STEM and so on, but we are also trying to get more men into what normally is women's work. I don't like that word, but as nurses, as kindergarten teachers, and I was very inspired by Iceland, because you said it was hot being a kindergarten teacher in Iceland, and I'm a kindergarten teacher, so maybe I'm going to Iceland. But I also think it's very important that you take these steps in school, because when you have guidance, I'm certain that when you guide boys, you'll guide them in a certain way, and when you guide girls, you guide them in a certain way also. And you have to have awareness there, but you also have to have that awareness as parents. I think, because we affect our kids from they're very, very small at home. And I've got 3 children, and it's very important that I also tell my daughter that she can become an engineer. I told her, actually, but also my boys that there's other possibilities, because I'm a role model for them. And the chores at home, the work that we are doing in Denmark, it's more or less the same, and you can't. I don't think you can make any legislation and hope that this will help that men will take their chores at home and do more work at home. But I think that you have to see this. In regard to that, more women in Denmark are actually working out, and when they're working out, you are spending 40 hours at work, and your husband is spending 40 hours at work. So the socks and washing and everything won't do it by itself. So you have to share it. So maybe some of it has been changed like that. I can see that my generation, in fact, for us, it's quite normal that we're doing these kind of things. And why are we doing it? Maybe because our mom told us to do it. So I think that's also a part of it.
Yes,
yeah. Thank you. I think the first point that was made here about women being the center of the discussion, I believe it's human rights that should be the center of the discussion. And I just want to use any method or any tool that I have to make sure that every person in the world has their full rights as a human being. And if that means, you have to take steps and talk about men, then I'll talk about men. And that's why we have this meeting here, because that's the point that we're making, that there are, like Manu said here earlier, there are benefits to gender equality. There's every person needs to have, be able to use their full potential as a human being. And it's also, like I thought it was such a good point, it's a smart thing to do. I mean, the GDP in Iceland is very small in if you look at the numbers, but if you look at that, we are about 330,000 persons living in Iceland, but we still enjoy one of the highest living standards in the world. We would not have that if we did not have the high level of women's participation in the labor market. And I think there's so many countries that could have, each and every person could have it so much better if we would make sure that each person can participate in the economy, can contribute whatever they can. And so that's the point that we want to make. It's just the smart thing to do. And I think also, in some ways, you answered the question that was pointed to me from I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Okay. Yes, there are some ideas, but the good thing also about being a Nordic in the Nordic cooperation is that we can pick up ideas from other Nordic countries, and there are really good models that we can look at it from Norway, for example, where they have connected financial contribution to kindergartens based on how important the level, whether they have equal, well, whether they don't have equal, but when they have higher percentage of men working in the kindergarten. I think it's also really, really important to go into the school system that each and every teacher understands how important he or she is in influencing the choices that the children will make. I think that I personally think that each teacher should have gone through gender studies and understand both, you know, the stereotypes that we work with every day, both towards boys and girls, but also the point that was made about the parents, how important the parents are. And I always remember I had a friend and we were, you know, in school when I was 16, 17, and 18. And I always remember she said when she was 16 and she was trying to make a choice whether she would go through, you know, the regular book studies and then go up to university, or if she could go in another different way. And her dream was to become an electrician. And she always said that her mother thought that was a really bad idea. You know, girls just did not become electricians. So she never became an electrician. And I think she would have been a really good one. So I think that's also important for each parents to think about, you know, how we impact the choices that our children make, and then the society as a whole. We are starting a project. This is pretty new, this ideology in Iceland. So we're looking at what Norway has done. We're looking at what Denmark has been doing. And we're working, for example, with the Nurses Association with regards to how we can increase the number of men that choose that subject. We also have a lot of old people that we'll need to take care of, so we need more men there also. I think I would like to pick up the point concerning parental leave, but it's also quite difficult when you have countries that don't have the benefits that we have in the Nordic countries. And it's also quite concerning to see, I think it was a recent study in Iceland that also showed that women that are in high-level positions, they are still doing the majority of household work. And I was really shocked, for example, to see that it was quite uncommon that the husbands of women in high-level positions, or the partners, they rarely did the washing, you know, because I never do the washing at home. And I do know how the washing machine works, but I never do it. And there are just other things that I do instead. So I know. So we're done now. But I can keep on talking. I can't.
And it's so important, and it's so very interesting. But I would like to give the floor to the two remaining participants. But there's two more answers coming up. So Anna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'll just comment with one proposal to be followed in other countries as well. I think it replies to many of the questions. I think in Iceland there have been many panels, in Finland as well, and our former Minister for Gender Equality established a working group on men's issues in gender equality, and it delivered its final report last October. And really there, the early childhood education stood out as one very essential thing in changing things, so that really traditional notions of girls and boys based on gender have to be addressed in our curricula for early childhood education and primary education, not only later when you are thinking about your professions and what to do and how to choose your future career or how to act at home and divide the household work and so on, but really addressing equality, early childhood. I think that's the key.
Let's see, I'll be very brief. I heard from a couple of speakers questions on, please don't forget girls in developing countries and the reality they face every day. I come from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Education was also mentioned by 2 speakers. And I just want to say to you that this is what you do specifically to improve the role of or equality for girls and women in developing countries. We have a new program called Education for Development. We are doubling our funding for education in developing countries in a 4-year period. It's a very ambitious program we have, and it will go from working with the multilateral systems such as the UN, development banks, civil society, and also with bilateral countries. And I just want to make one very specific example that was very moving to me when I was in Mozambique a few months ago. We support something called Girls Ambassadors. And this is an NGO that works with young girls, 14, 15-year-olds, that are very, very courageous. And they actually then, with the backup from adults, go and confront boys and teachers and others who harass them on the way to school, in school, and outside of school. And this is something that actually is working quite effectively. It's a way to confront the offenders face to face, and it's an important program, and I hope that can be scaled up in many countries. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I think we could have continued. I'm really sorry that I do have to close this session now, but thank you so very much to the distinguished panelists for all the important points. And thank you very much to all of you for participating and asking very relevant questions. I would just like to take the opportunity, actually, the economic issue, the smart things to do, was actually raised several times. And I would like to say that next week on Monday in this room, there will be another Nordic Side event on the economic parameter, on the smart politics. It's not normal gender equality people that we have in that panel. It's actually economists. So I'm very curious, and I'm going to chair that. But please come, and maybe we'll all get a bit more clever. Thank you very much.